Welcome, bienvenidos, benvindu, to the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show, part of the SDH network, the only English language show devoted to South America's premier club competition. I'm your host, Howard Hamilton, the founder of Soccermetrics. It's been several days since my last episode, a week in fact, so I don't think I'm going to be spoiling the result for any of you who want to watch the final later. By now, you already know the outcome of the Copa Libertadores final. Flamengo are champions of America after defeating Palmeiras in Lima. In this episode, I'll take a second lingering, long look at the final and salute the men who made Flamengo victorious. So let's jump into it with the starting lineups for both teams in this final. Abel Ferreira, manager of Palmeiras, made two changes from the second leg versus Liga de Quito and also made a change to his formation. He switched Gustavo Gomez to the middle of a three-man back line and moved Fuchs and Murillo to the outside. Carlos Miguel was starting as goalkeeper for the Greens. One tactical change that he made was to switch Andres Pereira from a forward-facing midfield role to more of a defensive role in front of the three-man back line. Mauricio, who featured in the second leg versus Liga de Quito, was taken out and replaced by Kelvin on the left-hand side of midfield. Joining him on the midfield line were Alan, Rafael Vega, who replaced Ruben Sosa, and Joaquin Piqueres. The forward line switched to two up front instead of three, with the attacking tandem of Victor Roque and Jose Lopez. For Flamengo, Felipe Luis made four changes from the second leg match versus Racing Club. A couple of them were enforced changes. Gustavo Plata was suspended with a red card that he received in the second leg, and Leo Ortiz was injured. Danilo would replace Ortiz in defense, and join him were Guillermo Varela, Leo Pereira, and Alexandro. Agustin Rossi continuing as goalkeeper for Flamengo. The defensive midfield tandem of Jorginho and Eric Pulgar continued in those two positions as they have for a majority of the tournament. Offensive midfield consisted of Samuel Lino, who replaced Luis Araujo, Jorge Carrascal, who moved to the right-hand side compared to where he was in the second leg, and Georgian de Arrasqueta in the middle of midfield. Alone up top was Bruno Henrique, replacing Gonzalo Plata. Now, one thing to remember about this match is that this is a final. There's a lot at stake, and teams are going to pursue a safety-first approach to this game. We remember the great finals, the high-scoring finals, the intense finals, because they are so rare. This match was more typical of there were very few big chances, there were more than a few nerves, and defense was a high priority for both sides. But the key thing to remember from this match was that Flamengo were in control almost the entire duration. Now, an interesting thing to keep in mind about Flamengo is that this is a team without an established striker. They have not found a replacement for Gabriel Barbosa, Gabigol, the player who almost single-handedly won Libertadores for them in 2019, the player who featured so frequently in other triumphs of Flamengo over the last 5 years. He's currently at Cruzeiro, who will be in the Copa Libertadores next season. But Flamengo have not found a consistent replacement for his goal-scoring ability. Bruno Henrique, who is supposed to be that goal scorer, achieved only one shot during this match. This was not his best game by any stretch. But where Flamengo stood out in this match, where they have stood out over the entire tournament, has been their defensive dominance. And that defensive dominance really shown in the performance of key Palmeiras players. Andreas Pereira was so important for Palmeiras during the knockout stage, particularly his contributions in midfield. He was the only player who really troubled Flamengo's defense. But he was positioned too far deep, in my opinion, for his impact to be properly felt. Rafael Veiga failed to connect in the opposing half. He failed to connect with any of his crosses, and he was subbed out in the 72nd minute. Peter Roque and Jose Lopez were number 1 and number 3 in non-penalty expected goals among all Libertadores players. In this final, Jose Lopez only managed 2 shots, and both of those shots were blocked. Roque, for his part, attempted 3 shots, 1 was blocked, and his best opportunity was in the 21st minute when he had a shot on the left-hand side that was closely guarded and went over the crossbar. Now, there were a couple of plays that I think were significant in this match. The first key play was Eric Pulgar's foul on Bruno Fuchs. Now, what happened in that play was there was a foul on another player, I believe it was Arrascaeta, and Flamengo had a free kick coming. Bruno Fuchs tapped the ball away while the players were moving around, I guess getting set for free kick, and Pulgar went over the top of the ball and stamped Fuchs in the ankle. A yellow card was given to Eric Pulgar by referee Dario Herrera. The Palmeiras players wanted a red card. The commentators on this match were wondering why Pulgar wasn't being given a red card. And if you looked at the replays, both sets of people had a significant point. Pulgar went almost, not necessarily studs up, but his studs landed on the top of Fuchs's foot, right at the ankle. It's a type of play where if it happened in the match, it would definitely be a setting off opportunity because that's a potential leg break kind of foul. But not only was Pulgar given the yellow card, VAR didn't call Dario Herrera to the monitors. So the referee's call stood on the field. Had Herrera given Pulgar a red card, I think that play would have stood. It's probably a type of call that is left at a referee's discretion. Perhaps because it was an off-the-ball foul and also something that happened after an initial whistle was made, that no further action was taken than the presenting of the yellow card. But that was a significant play. If Pulgar had been given a red card, Flamengo would have been down to 10 men, and that would have significantly changed the tenor of the match, and it definitely would have changed the game plans of both Felipe Luis and Abel Ferreira. Now, the second key play, and this is an obvious key play because it led to a goal, was Danilo's goal off the corner kick. And it was a result of a very well-taken corner by Georgian de Arrascaeta. It was right in the area of uncertainty for defending goalkeepers. But the key player in this sequence was Danilo. He was lingering at the back of the box. He left his marker, who was Allen, and he filled the space between both Fuchs and Murillo. Danilo rose high to meet the ball, and all of Palmeiras' players were rooted to the ground. Gomez, who was that central player in the three-man backline, moved toward him, but by the time he started moving toward him, it was already too late. It's significant to notice that Danilo rose highest, but he was the only one who left the ground during that entire sequence in the penalty area. And an interesting thing about that goal was that was Danilo's first shot taken on goal in the Libertadores season. And that was the shot that won the competition for Flamengo. There really wasn't much else to report in this match. Flamengo were closer to the second goal than Palmeiras was to an equalizer, despite the fact that this goal occurred midway through the second half. And Flamengo continued in control. They were deserved winners. They deserved to be crowned champions of America for a fourth time. So after 155 matches and 369 goals, one fewer goal than last year, we have our champions. Flamengo continues the streak of Brazilian clubs being victorious at the Copa Libertadores, now reaching seven winning clubs from Brazil since 2019. That is unprecedented dominance for a single country in this competition. Flamengo also represent the first four-time Brazilian winners of the Libertadores. They completed the Libertadores Brasileirão double, clinching the league title in midweek, and they matched Santos' achievements in the 1960s. And this was during the legendary Pelé era. And this is their fourth trophy of 2025. They won the state title of Rio de Janeiro, the Carioca. They won the Super Copa of Brazil, the Brasileirão, and of course the Libertadores. This was a team title. There was a dominant player. There was, a key player for them, and we'll talk about him in a moment. They weren't particularly dominant throughout the season. They did have their moments where they looked shaky, where it was not a given that they would advance the later stages of the competition. Keep in mind that this was a team that lost at home to Central Cordoba in the group stage. They were a team that needed some assistance to advance out of the group stage, and they only advanced out of the group stage in second place. But they won this competition with different people at different moments. Flamengo's squad used 29 players. Relatively small squad compared to previous Brazilian champions, but a much larger squad than what you typically see at other clubs throughout the continent. And when we consider the players who made up this champion side of Flamengo, we start with the goalkeeper. And that goalkeeper is Agustin Rossi. The 30-year-old made 13 appearances for Flamengo. He was their only goalkeeper who saw action in this competition. So naturally, he accumulated more minutes of play than any other player. He allowed 4 goals, and he achieved 10 clean sheets. Of course, not entirely his doing. He had a lot of help from his defensive peers, but 10 clean sheets is a significant accomplishment for a goalkeeper in this competition. In defense were Leo Pereira, who made 12 appearances over 1,159 minutes, 0.61 expected assists, 3 expected goals, and 1 goal scored. He appeared as a center back, useful in set pieces, and he led all defenders in non-penalty expected goals. Guillermo Varela, 32 years old, 12 appearances, 807 minutes, 1 goal scored as a right wing. He also moved into defensive midfield roles in a couple of Libertadores matches. Alongside Leo Pereira was Leo Ortiz, who made 11 appearances, just under 1,000 minutes of play in Libertadores, 0.59 expected assists, 1.05 expected goals, and 1 goal scored. He was famed for his set-piece conversion ability. Alexandro and Ayrton Lucas appeared as left wingbacks. Sandro making 10 appearances, 854 minutes, 0.77 expected assists. Ayrton Lucas, 7 appearances, 403 minutes. Danilo, the match winner of the final. The 34-year-old made 6 appearances, accumulating 440 minutes of play, 0.19 expected assists, 0.38 expected goals, and that one huge goal in the final. He appeared as a center back, as the right-hand side of 3 center backs. And the most significant, most interesting stat about Danilo is that he is now the only player to win Libertadores and the European Champions League twice. Wesley Franca Lima, a 22-year-old defender, made 5 appearances over 424 minutes, 0.45 expected assists, and 0.58 expected goals as a right wing back. And then wrapping up the defenders, Emerson Royale appeared for 87 minutes, and Joao Victor appeared for 10 minutes in one Libertadores appearance as a right wing back. And now, focusing on the midfielders, you have to start with Georgian de Arrasqueta. This was the best season by the 31-year-old since he joined the Rio de Janeiro side. Over 11 appearances in Libertadores, he was on field for 855 minutes, accumulating 1.9 expected assists and 2.76 expected goals, scoring 2 goals in the competition. One of only 2 players for Flamengo to score multiple goals in Libertadores. He was their leading goal scorer, he was the leading assist maker, he was one of 3 players in this competition to finish in the top 10 in expected goals and expected assists. And in my opinion, he should be the leading candidate for South American Player of the Year. Alongside him in midfield was Luis Araujo, formerly of Atlanta United. He appeared on field for almost 700 minutes in 13 appearances, 1.09 expected assists, 2.01 expected goals. Nominally a midfielder, he had some forward-facing roles in a number of Libertadores matches. Next to Arrasqueta, Luis Araujo was probably their most significant player in midfield. Eric Pulgar, a 31-year-old, 642 minutes over 7 appearances. He had more of a holding midfielder role for them. And alongside him in the holding midfield role was Jorginho, who came over from Arsenal in the summer transfer window. 6 appearances, 582 minutes, 1.08 expected assists. Everton was more of a deep line midfielder on the left-hand side, 207 minutes for the side over 6 appearances. Gerson, the central midfielder, a really famous name when it comes to midfielders who are Brazilian. 1.78 expected assists, 0.74 expected goals. He played 435 minutes for Flamengo in Libertadores over 5 appearances. Diego de la Cruz, 5 appearances as a left-sided central midfielder. He scored a goal and generated 1.6 expected assists over 408 minutes. Jorge Carrascal scored a key goal for Flamengo in the semifinal, in the first leg of the semifinal versus Racing Club. He tended to drop in between the forward and midfield lines, appearing 5 times for 306 minutes. Saul Iñiguez joined Flamengo in the summer transfer window from Atletico Madrid. He played more of a utility midfielder. Sometimes he was in forward-facing roles. A couple times he was in defensive roles. He made 4 appearances, 282 minutes, 0.46 expected assists, 1.0 expected goals. And Allen, 28 years old, 5 appearances, 221 minutes, 0.37 expected assists, 0.33 expected goals, a central midfield role, usually alongside Gerson. And other midfielders who made minor appearances for Flamengo were Wallacian, a 20-year-old. He played as a defensive midfield role, and Mateus Gonçalves, a 20-year-old who only appeared for a couple of minutes for Flamengo. He was transferred to Al Ahly in the Saudi Pro League. Moving on to the strikers. Head on this list was Bruno Pinto, 35 years old, 13 appearances, 819 minutes, 0.93 expected assists, 3.07 expected goals, and 1 actual goal scored. He was 9th among all players in non-penalty expected goals on the left-hand side. The most significant contributor from the forward role was Pedro, 28 years old, making 10 appearances for Flamengo over 462 minutes. He was usually the point man up top, but could also drop deeper. With 2.44 expected goals and 2 goals scored, he was their most effective goal scorer, and Flamengo could really have used him in the last stages of the tournament. But he suffered an injury that ruled him out for the remainder of 2025. Gonzalo Plata, 25 years old, played 514 minutes in Libertadores matches over 7 appearances. He dropped in between the forward and midfield lines and was part of that attacking trident of with Pedro and Bruno Pinto. Samuel Diaz Lino, the 26-year-old, was a summer transfer, also from Atletico Madrid. He was deployed more on the left-hand side. He appeared 448 minutes, 6 appearances, 0.58 expected assists, 1.04 expected goals. Everton Cebolinha appeared on the left-hand side, 413 minutes over 6 appearances, 0.24 expected assists, 0.39 expected goals. Juninho Vieira appeared as a right winger. He scored a goal for Flamengo during the group stage, appearing for a total of 211 minutes over 5 appearances. And finally, Michael, a 29-year-old, appearing 3 times for Flamengo over 162 minutes. And those were the players who made up this championship squad of Flamengo in the Copa Libertadores. And now let's talk about the manager, Felipe Luis. The 40-year-old former Brazilian defender, formerly of Chelsea and Flamengo itself, really stood out through his squad management and his defensive prowess. His defensive setups allowed him to get to this final, particularly in the semifinal match versus Racing Club. His defensive setup in this final also put his club in a strong position to win. He was one of 8 people to win Libertadores as a player and a manager. And he has single-handedly rehabilitated the image of Brazilian club managers. Brazilian club management has experienced a lot of criticism in recent years at club level and at the national team level. And some of that criticism is deserved. I think some of it was because their best former players had not been encouraged to go into management. I think another reason was that the environment surrounding domestic Brazilian football doesn't produce the best type of managers. It's not encouraging long-term projects. And Felipe Luis talked about this at length in post-match interviews. And so it's really important that Flamengo did give him, not only allowed him to organize a long-term project, but also stood by him when things weren't going well. And inevitably, as a manager, things won't go well. But Felipe Luis also has the talent to be a very good manager. If things continue as they have been going over the last year, obviously not every year is going to be like this. If he continues on his upward trajectory, he's very likely to become manager of Brazil's national team in the near future or even the medium-term future. So what is next for Flamengo? Flamengo advanced to the group stage of the 2026 Copa Libertadores. We will see them next season. We'll see them in the 2029 FIFA Club World Cup. They've already left for Qatar to play a match versus Cruz Azul in a match called the Derby of the Americas, which will serve as a qualifier for the Intercontinental. If they win that, they'll play a semifinal against either an African or Asian representative, and then that winner will go on to play Paris Saint-Germain later in the month. And then late in January of next year, the state championships restart in Brazil, and in April, the Copa Libertadores returns. So the race for the grand prizes in South American football never end. In fact, the 2026 season has already begun. So that concludes this episode of looking back at this season's Copa Libertadores final and raising the glass to the champion. So if you have a comment or question about this podcast or the Copa Libertadores, send them to my X handle at Soccermetrics. You can also send questions or comments to @SoccerDownHere or to Jason Longshore at Longshoe. In the next episode, I'll put a bow around this season's Libertadores with my best 11 and with the season review, and fill out the entry list for next year's competition. This has been the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show, proudly part of the SDH network. See you later. Hasta luego. E até mais.